Hi, I'm Dan.
And I'm Lynnea.
And this is Dusted or Busted. This week, everyone comes back in after the elimination. And it's really sad because Trixie's gone. And then they show the setup for the rest of the episode with Mrs. Kasha Davis talking about Pearl basically giving up.
Because Pearl came in and said, she was like, I've just kind of had it with the judges not liking me and giving me all these awful critiques. And one thing that Mrs. Kasha Davis said right before the episode officially starts is she said, be grateful for the opportunity you have, otherwise leave. Which I completely agree with. We've seen some of these queens give up already, and we're only in episode 5.
Right.
And they were talking about a little bit last time, too, that you've worked hard enough, and there are enough people who want to be here or who wish they could be here, that you owe it to yourself and to them and to the show to not give up.
The mini challenge this week was to make red carpet looks out of paper. Mm-hmm. So the queens were put into groups of 2, and they had to make the Cher Oscar look, the J-Lo really low cut dress look, the Lady Gaga meat dress, the Bjork swan dress, and the Lil Kim nipple hanging out dress.
Yeah, the vision in purple.
Yeah. Who is your most dusted?
I'm gonna go with Katya and Mrs. Kasha Davis.
Me too. That was so hilarious.
Because Katya looked great, and then Mrs. Kasha Davis just took it to the next degree. I think without Mrs. Kasha Davis doing that, I would have had to give it to Pearl and Max because the Cher look was spot on. So who's your most busted?
Violet and Fame.
Oh, I did Ginger and Candy.
Oh wow.
I mean, I thought it was funny, but it was funny because it was bad.
Ginger and Candy?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ginger couldn't even walk.
No.
So, Mrs. Kasha Davis and Katya win the mini challenge, which means that in the main challenge, they are going to be the hosts of the award show, the Despies. And the other groups from the mini challenge will have to each present about one of the awards.
So they're in the workroom getting ready, and the duos are kind of talking about their ideas and what they want to do. And the first thing is you see Miss Fame and Violet coming up with their ideas. Fame keeps shooting down Violet's ideas a little bit because they're not that funny. And Violet was like, well, I think it's funny. And Fame tells her, if you think it's funny, then present it in a comical way. Because I think this and Snatch Game and some of these other challenges, it's not it is what you say, but it's also how you say it. And Violet's delivery, along with Fame, because they're not comedy queens, that's going to play a huge part of it, is if they can deliver the lines in a funny way.
Right. And then we cut to Max and Pearl, and they're trying to work, and then RuPaul comes into the workroom and says, Max, you have a large personality, and Pearl, you don't have a large personality, so how are you going to make up for that?
And then they have a little bit of a standoff, because Pearl says, well, you basically just told me that I don't have a personality. And then RuPaul's like, well, I'm trying to light a fire under your ass. And Pearl says something about well, but I like my personality. I think I have a great personality. And RuPaul was like, I want you to do well. That's why I brought you here. And it kind of seemed it's kind of like Pearl's the bratty teenager who's not getting what they want. And RuPaul was the
mother knows best.
Yeah, the disappointed parent of tough love. I'm telling you this to make you better. It's not because I'm picking on you. It's because you need to be better. I brought you here for a reason. So step it up. And then
Pearl walks out of the workroom.
Right.
Which later Max we find out in Untucked that it took an hour.
Right. Well, and the thing I noticed about that was Max was trying to get her out of her rut, and she was like, okay, come on, let's do this as soon as that little confrontation was over. And Pearl just kind of swats her away and gets up and leaves, which I was like, that's not what you do to your teammate at all. But the other things, that was kind of the big thing of the workroom. But I also wrote down that Kennedy didn't really want to work with Jaden. I noticed that.
Yeah.
They were having some tensions. Jaden...
I think Kennedy just thought she was so much funnier than Jaden.
Well, yeah, and Jaden would throw out an idea, and Kennedy at one point just shushed her. Jaden said something, and she had an idea, and she's like, oh, okay, and then once we're done, we can segue to this. And Kennedy just goes, hush. which I thought was rude.
Yeah.
And then another thing, I don't know why I wrote this down or why this caught my eye, but Mrs. Kasha Davis, the shirt she was wearing while they were getting ready, I love that. It was this, like, black dress shirt with the rhinestones. I don't know why, but, like, when I looked over, I saw that, and it just totally caught my eye. I think it's interesting to see what the queen's fashion is when they're not in their drag persona, like, what they look like when they're just, like, hanging out with each other. So that was kind of cool. I was like, ooh, I like what you're wearing. And then Katya had a couple of good lines in there. One of them was, Violet and Fame. Oh, that's going to be a laugh riot. And then the other thing is Katya, like, her talking heads are always just really manic. Like, they're so high energy. And so there was one where she was talking and they showed, she was talking while they were showing something in the workroom, and then they cut back to her and she just goes, I want to win. And just the way she said it and the look in her eyes, I was like, she's going for it.
For the first time, I don't think this week was going to be a disaster for Katya. Each group had a coaching session with Kathy Griffin, and that was awkward.
I thought that she wasn't helpful. She tore all of them apart and kind of justified because
a lot of them weren't funny.
Right, they weren't funny, but she didn't offer any other suggestions. She wasn't helpful. She was just reading them on what they were doing, and I thought that was something where she really could have offered her expertise, and she didn't.
The Kathy Griffin I see in her stand-up was very different from the Kathy Griffin I saw in this episode.
Yeah, I thought she was kind of rude. Like, she just dismissed them, like, working with them was beneath her. After their coaching session, then they are getting ready to go to the runway and do the Despies Awards. And there's this whole segment with Miss Fame talking about chickens. Of all things, chickens. And she's talking about how she, like, has this really strong emotional bond with her chickens back home, and she talks to them, and they were her only friends. And I have no idea what was going on, or if the producers needed to just fill time. But if they talk about things like this in Miss Fame's talking heads, I want to know what else we don't see. What's all the random shit that we just completely gloss over, because it was intriguing and horrifying and hilarious all at the same time. It was like a car crash. I couldn't look away.
My favorite part was when she pointed to her tattoo. She's like, this one won an award. So then we move on to the actual awards. Mrs. Kasha Davis and Katya open the show. I thought they did a pretty good job.
Right.
And Katya was funnier than Mrs. Kasha Davis, but Kasha Davis did fine, I thought.
And I thought everybody did a really good job. There were some that stood out that were better than others, and some that I was like, it just didn't work. But it was interesting. The girls who won awards and who got to give an awards speech, they were able to do more, and then the ones who were just part of a duo. So as I was writing them down, I just wrote them down in the order that they came up on stage, so it got a little disjointed. But I thought that of the duos, Fame and Violet struggled the most just because they don't play off of each other well. So, like, Kennedy and Jaden, they weren't doing well in the workroom, but once they got up there, they were hilarious because they were able to work with each other. And, like, Miss Fame had a great acceptance speech. Katya's acceptance speech was hilarious. I thought everything she did was hilarious. And Ginger, it felt a little bit scripted. Candy felt a little bit forced. I mean, I know it was all scripted, but they really...
It felt more scripted.
Yeah. So I thought overall everybody did really well.
Can we talk about Pearl and Max? Oh my god. I was expecting, like, the second car crash of this season in RuPaul's Drag Race history. Mm-hmm. And then Pearl, of all fucking people, turns it out. I think she outshined Max.
She definitely did.
That fucking impersonation of Ginger. I was having, like, a spiritual moment watching that. I was in the library when I watched that. I had to contain myself.
My most dusted of the Despies was Katya. I thought
for the look?
No,
oh, no,
for her presentation and her acceptance speech. I just thought everything she did was hilarious. I couldn't stop laughing. She completely, like, stole my attention every time. And the other thing was when she was sitting in the audience, like, when they would pan and watch her reactions, she just seemed like she was such a good sport about it.
So much
and she
fun.
Seemed like she was having so much fun. I think that's why I was so drawn to her, because she had so much natural energy because she was having just a blast with it. Who was your most dusted?
My most dusted of the challenge... I want to say Pearl, but I kind of overlooked Katya, so I'm going to go with Katya with an asterisk by her name.
Okay. My most busted, I couldn't decide between Ginger and Candy, but I went with Candy. Just because she kind of got lost for me, and everybody else had one or two moments that were good. As a duo, Fame and Violet struggled the most, but individually, I still thought that they did better than Candy did.
Yeah. Everyone was saying after last week that Candy hasn't been getting a lot of screen time. So I think this was a really good episode for her to get some screen time. But now it seems kind of like shady that the only time they ever pull her out is when they need her to send someone home. I think my most busted of like the presenting and accepting awards was Miss Fame, actually. Nothing about her presence wowed me. And the jokes that she was telling seemed kind of old. Like, I feel like I've heard them before. Yeah. Like the crying because you've had Botox. RuPaul says that.
On to this week's runway. I thought that my most dusted was Kennedy for the runway look.
Really?
Yeah, I thought her look was beautiful.
I listed her look as one of my most busted.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just thought it was so glamorous. I really liked it.
I didn't like the color on her. Do you remember in season 4 when Latrice wore that one dress that Santino said looked like a couch?
Yes.
That's what Kennedy's dress reminded me of. My most dusted was actually someone they didn't like.
Who?
Candy.
Really?
I thought that the blue looked so good on her, and her makeup was
She should have just
beautiful.
taken that damn cape
the feather
thing off.
Yeah.
If that would have been off, she probably would have been my most
I actually
dusted.
kind of liked the feather thing.
Well, I did too, but like then there should have been some kind of a reveal to see what was underneath.
I also liked Max's look. I wrote Max until I remembered Candy was still
the thing I had to say about Max was that last week,
Michelle,
one of Michelle's comments was, "I'm going to challenge you to not wear gray hair next week." And she did. And obviously she pulled it off because Michelle didn't comment on it, or not that we saw. But that is one thing where if she's going to go for versatility, that's one thing that she could change easily.
Yeah.
Without risking
herself.
sabotaging her look. Right. So I did write that. Who was your most busted?
I wrote 3. God. You go first, then I'll decide.
Jaden. Didn't like it. There's too much skirt going on. It looked like she put a bunch of loofahs through the shredder and then sewed it onto a bottom. And it didn't flatter her at all. I didn't think the color looked very good. And then her hair with it looked really messy, not put together at all.
Yeah, I'm going to say Jaden, too, for the same reasons that you said. I wrote Ginger, Jaden, and Kennedy, and then the more that you talked about Jaden's, I was like, yeah. So the lip sync song was...
What was
I don't remember, by Tina Marie. Tina Marie, that's her name, right?
Yeah, I think so.
God, it's been a hell of a
Honestly,
week. I liked Mrs. Kasha Davis from the beginning because I did not see that coming from her. And I feel like this lip sync really, she showed the fire and that she really wanted to be there. She deserved to be there. And Candy, I understand what she was going for with the slow start, and then she also impressed
turns up
me.
at the end.
Because the song starts
so good.
The song starts like my opening line might be a bit passé, which is clever on her part to start off a little bit more passé and then build up to it.
Well, and what we saw in our research, Candy Ho can perform.
Yeah, I kind of saw elements of that.
She's a good lip syncer, and that's great. I don't know. The more I watched, I was like,
I keep going back and forth.
Turning the party.
I know.
I think that if they were going to use Surprise We'll Keep Both, this should be the episode. I know I said that last time, so that we could have kept them both. But
this would be even more surprising because you wouldn't see it.
If it came down to the lip sync, like, this was tight. Just a few words about the judging this week. First of all, I never notice when it's Ross speaking because his voice doesn't sound like a man. And that is it's not a problem for me that he doesn't sound like a man. His voice is really feminine, but he also never adds anything.
He's had the same critique for like 2 people.
Yeah. So he is kind of forgettable for me, and I really don't think his judging is adding anything of substance. There's no helpful critiques. And he's not funny either.
He's not.
Overall, I kind of disagreed with pretty much everything, because when they were talking about the award show, they were all very underwhelmed with every queen. They all said that, we wanted more, they weren't that funny. Well, when I was watching, RuPaul couldn't stop laughing, especially at people like Katya. And that was one where they were like, oh, we wanted more from her. It didn't seem to line up. And some of the people who I thought their jokes didn't land very well, they praised highly. And I don't know if we were watching the same award show or not. And then I know that Max and Pearl, I think that they only won the challenge because RuPaul had such low expectations. Because yes, they were good, but I thought there were other duos who were just as good.
They're trying to create a redemption storyline for Pearl is what they're doing.
But I just think that it was strange. Whatever. The judging this week seemed very arbitrary.
Same as every week.
First thing that happens in Untucked,
Pearl
spills a drink. Girl, and she's wearing white. Careful.
Mrs. Kasha Davis's heart broke. There wasn't a whole lot to say in this Untucked.
No.
They ganged up on Violet again.
Right. Well, because before the queens who were still out on the runway came back, they were talking about there's a difference between like getting in your funny reads, especially during this kind of a thing, which was similar to the roast in the sense that they could kind of poke fun at each other. And then there's just being mean and being rude.
Yeah, and they were talking about that.
And how Violet kind of used it as an opportunity to say mean and hurtful things instead of just like lighthearted, funny stuff. And some of the queens took it well regardless. But then there were some that you could tell, like with Pearl, she was like not having
Basically,
it anymore.
they said Pearl got it the worst and Jaden got it the worst. I want to see like all the stuff that they talk about in Untucked. I love Untucked. But I want there to be more consistency between like what we see and what they talk about. Because after Ginger gets her message from her husband, she says something about when Kasha Davis got a message last week.
Oh, I missed that.
Or like how everyone was saying like all these things like Jaden's busted. Like build up to that. Like I didn't get her being busted at all, except for the fact that she like cried in Shakespeare and didn't do well on her first take last week.
Right. Then Mrs. Kasha Davis calls out Jasmine for being prematurely packed, and then Pearl for just like walking out, and then Candy because Candy was like, I'm over it. And Mrs. Kasha Davis was like, we worked too hard to give up now. That's so disrespectful. And I agree with her. And I'm glad that she just said it. And she said it in a way that was direct and to the point, but I didn't feel like she was being mean or singling anybody out. Like, she was.
I agree.
But she didn't have to go the extra mile and twist the knife. She could just say it, and people understood, and then she got to her point.
I don't want to, like, say I'm glad about this, but I did notice that Michelle did acknowledge Ginger's, like, hairline. And that's a pageant thing to do, is that you take, like, a full-sized wig, put it like the halfway back of your head, and then you just spray paint the front of your head. Yeah. And, you know, it's nice to see that style of drag is still recognized and understood. Just my 2 cents.
Ginger got her video message, which was very sweet. It was
very sweet.
That was
nice to see her cry. Violet almost shed a tear. And then Miss Fame goes fucking crazy.
It was funny though, because I totally got it, right? Because she's like, I feel like they've been building up and there's just been a lot of pressure and nobody's really had that emotional release yet. Like hardly any, but they haven't had a good cry yet this season. So this was the episode. And so I feel like, you know, Fame also has a boyfriend and, you know, is dealing with being away from them and being away from home. And she even said she's got some other stuff that she's just, like, dealing with right now. And so this for her was, like, a time to just, like, have a good cry and, like, let the stress of competing out. Because I'm sure it's stressful. They have to do so much in so little time. And then she's, like, trying to, like, get over it and be like, okay, calm down. But she, like, just can't stop crying. And then she starts laughing. So she's laughing and crying all at the same time. And I just thought it was really funny, and it showed that she is human, and she's, like, recognized, she's like, oh my god, this is so silly, I can't stop crying, but then she's just in hysterics because she's got two, like, opposite ends of the emotional spectrum going.
She's
She's crazy.
She definitely subscribes to like some new age philosophy. She's read The Secret, and what I noticed is she, instead of saying like I cried for Ginger, she's like I lost my tears. Like that's totally some like new age bullshit where it's like you're not crying, you're liberating your tears, you're liberating your sadness, and then she's like I'm just so happy you found love. Like that. Maybe I'm just bitter, but like people don't say that. Do people say that? Like, and then this whole time, Fame is losing it, and Ginger's, like, finally brought herself back down to earth. She's like, what the f...
The last thing I have to say is as Miss Kasha Davis leaves...
I know. She was so classy. So
classy, and said the right things with the right tone, was still honest, but optimistic, and overall, her takeaway was just, I'm so grateful for the chance to have been here. And I've been trying for this for 7 years and finally got it. And so, you know, good for you.
He'd better have that boxed wine chilling. My quote of the week was after Miss Fame went nuts in Untucked, and Ginger's composing herself, and they're all about to go out for their smoke break. You can hear Miss Fame just blathering on and crying and bawling and just going into hysterics. And Ginger goes, "Oh, I need a lighter." And she wasn't intentionally trying to be funny, but just that moment, when it occurred, how she said it.
Mine?
No. My quote of the week comes from Kennedy. We're going to keep this part in, too. They were all talking about Violet and how Violet can't make any friends. And Kennedy goes, "I sucked you off in the bathroom, Miss Thing." She said that. Go back and watch Untucked, and I swear to God, she said that.
Well, I can't really top that. It goes all the way back to the mini challenge, and Fame and Violet are paired up, and Fame goes, "I'm paired up with Violet, and I'm the glass half full. She's like the empty beer bottle you'd find next to the chair." So just another quote about her negativity, which I thought was funny, especially because it was coming from Miss Fame, who until recently she's kind of been in the same camp as Violet and been really negative and very much like, well, I do glamour and that's about it.
Overall, dusted and busted of the week.
Dusted for me was Katya.
Dusted for me was question mark. I am gonna say Pearl, because she did a really good job in the challenge. I didn't like her runway that much. However, she redeemed herself from last week, and her runway wasn't terrible. So, Pearl's my most dusted.
Okay. Most busted, Jaden. Because I didn't like her runway. And
Child.
And I didn't like... She did okay during the awards, but I think that she definitely got overshadowed by Kennedy. So Jaden is my most busted.
My most busted was Miss Fame. I didn't think she was funny in the challenge, and as entertaining as she was cringe-worthy this episode.
Yeah, I don't know what was happening with her, and I didn't particularly love her runway either. Like, it was just strange. It was like this weird turtleneck thing, and then the sleeves came to here, and then the gloves started here, and it...
Didn't Michelle read her for that?
Michelle said she liked it.
I thought she said she didn't like it.
Well, I don't know.
Well, we all know how Michelle feels about turtlenecks.
So, since... How many queens remain now?
9.
So now that we're really paring it down, we want to talk really quickly about who our top 5 are in our predictions. So my top 5, I have Max, Katya, Violet, Fame, and Ginger. I think those 5 will end up in the top 5.
I think the top 5 is going to be Max, Violet, Ginger, Kennedy Davenport, and Jaden Dior Fierce.
Really?
Yeah, you hate Jaden.
I do. I don't hate Jaden. I don't like how she's been performing. I liked her better when we did our research than I do now. But those are just my thoughts. Our predictions for next week's episode. Merle comes back.
Maybe Santino's back next week, too.
Ugh. Well, Merle's back, and the whole the queens get split up into 3 teams, and it's an acting challenge. So within the 3 teams, they have to play RuPaul and Michelle and Merle, and it's all about what happened and why Merle got replaced, what the story is. So one group has RuPaul's side of the story, another group has Merle's side of the story, and then the other group has what actually happened, right? Or is it Michelle's?
I thought it was Michelle's side of the story.
One of those 3. So they all have different viewpoints, and they have to do the acting thing. So I think that will be very interesting.
And the teams were shadily picked by Ginger Minge.
I'm so sick of these group challenges.
I am too. We're down to top fucking 9. Let's not. I'm sick of this shit.
I know. I just think at some point they need to take ownership of what they're doing. And even in some of the Untucked, some of the queens have been commenting about how, like, well, so-and-so's been carrying this person, or, like, anybody who's paired with Max does well, and this person has really been relying on whoever they get paired up with. So I'm ready for this to be done.
Even Miss Fame is saying, like, well, fuck, I'm with Pearl again.
Right. And so I think, even though it's a group challenge, I don't like that, but there's only 3 queens in each group.
Yeah.
So, we'll see what happens.
So team 1 is Ginger, Kennedy, and Katya.
Mm-hmm.
Team 2 is Max and Violet and Candy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last group is the other 3.
The other 3. One thing that RuPaul has said in one, like, video or something, I don't remember what I was watching, but he was talking about the Merle thing, and Michelle was slated to be on RuPaul's Drag Race since the beginning. And I guess the show was created with her in mind. And she was supposed to be on it from day 1, but because she was with some other, like, group or doing some other show, she, like, in her contract, she couldn't do RuPaul's Drag Race. And it sounds like that was maybe just, like, it was a little bit of a point of contention between the 2 of them. Like, they obviously didn't have a falling out, but RuPaul was kind of like, come on, like, I did this show so that we could do this together, and she was like, I can't, like, I wish that I could, but I can't. So they got Merle to stand in for 2 seasons, and then as soon as Michelle got out of that other thing, then she could join the show. But that was just something that was interesting, so I'm thinking that will probably be addressed in one of the viewpoints, but I'm interested to see if this delves deeper into that side of RuPaul and Michelle's relationship as friends. That's all I have for this episode of Dusted or Busted. Thank you for watching. Tune in next week, and we will be back with more of the same. So, I don't know. Do you have anything else to add?
Nope.
All right. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye.
In honor of this week's departed queen, Mrs. Kasha Davis, we have to make a cocktail. So, her drink of choice is, of course, the boxed wine. And now we're gonna add some spiced rum, because nothing wrong with a little extra liquor. And some Coke, you know, red wine and Coke just goes together. And then we're gonna top it off with this H2O berry flavored sparkling water. And there you have it for Mrs. Kasha Davis, the boxed wine cocktail!